I moved to this small town a few weeks ago. I was looking for quiet after the chaos of city life. The first night in my cozy cottage was peaceful. I thought I made the right choice. But then things got weird. That first night, I felt unsettled. As I lay in bed, I heard scratching noises from the attic. I tried to ignore it. Old houses make odd sounds, I told myself. I closed my eyes, hoping for sleep. But something felt off. I felt like I was being watched. The next night, the scratching changed to faint thumps. I sat at my desk, working late. I thought I saw something move in my peripheral vision. It darted away when I turned my head. My heart thumped loudly, but there was nothing there. I shook it off, telling myself it was my imagination. I tried to focus on my design work, but I felt a chill creep through the room. As days passed, whispers began to fill the air. At first, they were soft, like distant conversations. I turned down my music, straining to listen, but I couldn't make out the words. The hairs on my neck stood up. I started leaving my lights on at night, hoping it would ease my fear. But the shadows kept moving, almost taunting me. One evening, I thought a walk might help clear my mind. The moon was bright as I walked along the path by the woods. But the trees made me uneasy. I passed my neighbor's house, an old man who often stared at me. That night, he looked at me with a strange intensity. I hurried past, feeling a shiver run down my spine. I rushed back to my cottage and locked the door. My heart was racing. What was happening in this town? I tried to convince myself it was stress. But in the back of my mind, I sensed something more sinister. I decided I had to confront my fears. I found myself standing under the attic door, hand trembling on the knob. I heard another soft thump above me. My breath caught. Maybe it was nothing. I opened the door just a crack, and a cold draft washed over me. Then I heard a voice. "Why are you here?" It came from the darkness above. I froze. I couldn't speak. I hit the light switch, but the bulb flickered. Shadows danced around me. I took a deep breath, willing myself to move forward. But just then, the light went out completely, plunging me into darkness. Panic surged through me. I couldn't see anything. I turned back to the door, ready to bolt. Then I thought I heard the whispers again, swirling around me, echoing in the dark. I couldn't make out the words, but I felt the weight of them pressing in. I felt trapped. Lost in the silence, the shadows seemed to close in. I didn't know what to do. I took a step backward, away from the attic door, trembling. I was alone, yet I felt anything but. I stumbled back, nearly losing my footing. I turned to the door, ready to escape this suffocating darkness. But then, the whispers grew louder, swirling around me like a chilling wind. "Stay," they urged. I stood frozen, heart pounding, caught between fight or flight. Suddenly, the attic creaked ominously, as if something was shifting above. I strained to listen through the chaos in my mind. "Who are you?" I called out into the void, my own voice feeling thin and fragile. The only answer was another thud. It echoed through the house, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. Just as I decided enough was enough, a flash of white caught my eye. I turned again, squinting into the impenetrable dark. It flickered and vanished, like a candle blown out too soon. My skin prickled. Was it my imagination playing tricks on me? I needed to know. With a shaky hand, I grabbed my phone and switched on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing the staircase leading up to the attic. I took a hesitant step forward, then another. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel my pulse reverberating in my ears. The whispers faded, replaced by a heavy silence. I reached the bottom of the attic stairs, breathing hard. I needed to confront whatever or whoever was up there. I took the first step up, and the old wood creaked beneath my weight, echoing through the night. Every step felt like an eternity. I was aware of the shadows lengthening, stretching across the floor. My light flickered erratically as if whatever was up there didn't want me to reach it. But I was determined. Finally, I reached the top. I swung the door open, expecting chaos. Instead, I found nothing. Just a dusty, empty attic filled with cobwebs and shadows. Disappointment washed over me as I scanned the room, but something caught my eye. In the corner, a small doll lay on the floor, its glassy eyes staring back at me. It hadn't been there before. I approached it cautiously, my curiosity and fear warring inside me. How did it get here? I bent down to pick it up, and as soon as my fingers brushed the porcelain skin, the whispers surged back, more urgent and distressed than before. Leave now, I jumped back, dropping the doll as if it burned my hand. The air grew heavier, suffocating. My heart raced as I pivoted toward the stairs, desperate to escape. In that moment, something brushed past me cold and swift. I didn't stop to look. I half fell down the stairs, scrambling for the door. I burst through the threshold and slammed it shut, breathing heavily against the solid wood. My mind raced. What was happening? I pressed my back against the door, trying to calm myself. Whatever was up there, it wasn't just shadows or a faded memory. Something wanted me gone. Then it hit me, the neighbor. The intensity of his gaze lingered in my thoughts. What did he know? I knew I needed to confront him. I had to find answers. But before I could process that thought, a new sound filled the air, a soft knock, gentle yet ominous, coming from the attic door behind me. My stomach dropped. I had a feeling I wasn't alone in the house anymore. I took a deep breath, pushing back the wave of panic crashing over me. The knock came again, soft but insistent. My mind raced through all the possible scenarios. What if the whispers had been a warning? What if whatever was up there was now searching for me? I could feel my heartbeat thundering in my chest as I slowly turned around to face the door. It stood quiet now, the only sound was the distant rustling of leaves outside. Did it even make a sound, or was my mind just playing tricks on me? Should I open it? With shaking hands, I reached for the doorknob. My breath caught as I hesitated. I was on the verge of discovering something terrifying, or perhaps deeply unsettling. Just then, another knock echoed through the empty space, louder this time. I stepped back, releasing the handle. I had to think. My phone buzzed in my pocket, breaking through my swirling thoughts. I pulled it out, checking the screen for any messages. Nothing. But then I noticed the time, midnight. I hadn't realized how late it had gotten. Staring at the clock, I recalled the stories my grandmother told me about this time of night. Strange things happened. Secrets were unveiled. Would this be one of those times? Before I could turn away from the door, something creaked again above me, followed by a series of thumping sounds almost like footsteps. I clenched my jaw. Enough was enough. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to find them cowering by the door. My hand steadied as I opened the door to the attic. I flicked on my flashlight, illuminating the musty space and the doll still lying motionless on the floor. It felt like an invitation, a cruel taunt to come closer. I took a cautious step inside. The air was stale, thick with years of neglect and something else, something wrong. I bent down, picking up the doll again. This time I examined it closely. The eyes were unnaturally realistic, and a shiver ran down my spine. There was something scrawled on the bottom of its dress. I squinted, using the flashlight to light my way. "Help me," it read in faded ink. My breath hitched. Was this a coincidence, or was this doll a silent plea for assistance? Who had left it here, and what did they need help from? Before I could ponder it further, the attic door slammed shut behind me with a resounding bang. The sound reverberated around the small space, and I stumbled backwards in response. I spun around, heart racing, as a thick silence enveloped me. The whispers returned, swirling in a cacophony of chaos in my mind. Help, help, help! I could feel my knees weaken. I was trapped, alone in a suffocating silence with only the doll and the whispers for company. My instincts screamed at me to get out, but I needed to confront this darkness that clung to the edges of my existence. As I took a step forward, the room felt colder, the shadows around me shifting and moving. I realized I had awoken something, a presence that didn't want to be disturbed. Just as I thought about how to escape, the light flickered and went out completely, plunging me into darkness. "Who's there?" I called, my voice sounding small and fragile against the overwhelming silence. That's when I saw it, two glowing eyes staring back at me from the corner of the attic. The eyes seemed to shimmer like distant stars, eerily bright against the darkness. I felt my breath quicken as the figure slowly took shape. It was slight and shadowy, with tangled hair that hung like tendrils. My first instinct was to run, but something kept me rooted in place, a magnetic pull that urged me to stay. "Who are you?" I demanded, trying to sound braver than I felt. The figure didn't move, but the whispers heightened in intensity around me, swirling like a tempest. "Help!" The voice was faint but distinct, echoing the plea from the doll. It was coming from the figure, but I could barely understand it over the roar of my fear. "Help who?" I shouted over the chaos. "What do you want?" The shadows flickered, and the figure flinched, as if my words had struck it. A moment passed, heavy with silence. The whispers slowed, revealing only the rustling sound of debris in the corner of the attic. I felt my heart plummet. I couldn't be the only one here. Yet as I shifted, the figure's eyes bore into mine, drawing me in. Suddenly, the flashlight flickered back to life, illuminating the space just enough for me to see clearly. The doll lay forgotten on the floor, yet the figure remained. It stepped closer, revealing more details: thin limbs, a tattered dress, and hauntingly familiar features. I gasped. It looked like a younger version of myself. "What?" I stammered, unable to comprehend what I was seeing. My mind raced with questions. Was this a dream? A delusion? "Help me," the shadowy figure repeated, its voice shivering with desperation. "I can't escape." Before I could respond, the attic trembled. Dust fell from the rafters, and an icy wind swirled around me, wrapping tightly. I stumbled back, feeling the weight of the darkness pressing in. I wanted to flee, to dart back through the door, but my fascination held me still. "Why can't you escape?" I whispered, desperate for answers. The figure raised a shaky hand, pointing toward a corner of the room that I hadn't noticed before. My gaze shifted, and I saw a faint outline of what appeared to be a small door, half hidden behind a stack of boxes. It was warped and appeared older than the rest of the attic. "Find it," the figure urged, drawing my attention back. "Free me." A sudden realization struck. This was about more than just a doll, or whispers. Someone or something had been trapped here for a reason. I glanced back at the doll, a connection forming in my mind. Was this the key? Just then, the lights flickered again, casting shadows that danced wildly across the walls. I needed to act. I approached the hidden door slowly, a chill creeping up my spine. As I reached for the handle, I felt a rush of dread wash over me. But before I could open it, everything went black again. The cold presence enveloped me once more, and the figure hissed. "Don't leave me!" Panic surged as I stumbled backward, heart racing. I could barely see anything. I had to choose: confront the darkness, or somehow escape this nightmare. In that moment of hesitation, I heard a third knock, louder than before, reverberating through the thick silence. It was coming from the attic door. I held my breath, waiting for what would come next. The knock echoed again, shattering the stillness. My heart raced as I turned toward the attic door, the looming darkness still pressing in around me. Who or what was out there? I glanced back at the shadowy figure, whose eyes were still fixed on me, pleading. "I'll be right back," I yelled, feeling foolish. I wasn't even sure which direction I was headed. With a few cautious steps, I made my way toward the door. The wood felt cold and unwelcoming beneath my fingers. I hesitated, staring at the handle as another knock resounded, more insistent this time. "Let me in!" A muffled voice called out from the other side. Was it just my imagination? Who are you?" I managed to stammer, still facing the door. The last thing I wanted was to invite something worse than what was already haunting me in this attic. "Someone who can help you," the voice insisted. It was desperate, filled with urgency. but my instinct screamed at me to retreat. I turned sharply, back toward the figure. It stared at me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "You shouldn't listen to them," it warned, voice trembling. "They can't be trusted." "Who are you?" I asked the figure, feeling the weight of its gaze. "Why can't you escape? What's behind that door?" "Find it," it repeated more fervently, while the attic trembled again. "You need to find the key." "Key?" I furrowed my brow, confusion clouding my mind. There was something about the urgency in its voice that made me move. As I turned back to the door, I noticed the outline of the small door in the corner. It seemed to shimmer slightly, as if it were alive. The flashlight flickered again, revealing more of the strange etchings that covered the door's surface. Symbols I didn't recognize twisted and merged in an intricate pattern. "What do they mean?" I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. "Do you have the courage to know?" the figure asked, its voice barely above a whisper. I pressed my forehead against the small door as the whispers swelled around me. It was like a choir chanting, their words blending into something unintelligible. I felt the tremor within my chest shift to a deep-rooted dread. "Answer me!" I shouted, gripping the doorknob again. "What does it take?" The figure's face twisted in agony, its dark eyes wide. Suddenly, a gust of wind surged through the attic, knocking me back. I hit the floor hard, gasping as the shadows thickened. The atmosphere shifted, and I realized my breath was visible, a thin mist rising between us. Then, the door slammed open. It swung on cracked hinges, revealing nothing but an inky blackness beyond. I could hear muffled voices, chanting, the call of those who were lost. My heart raced. I had no more time. I scrambled from the floor and lunged for the hidden door. Whatever lay inside might hold the answers. But just as I reached out, a desperate scream pierced the air, freezing me in my tracks. "Help!" The voice came from the doorway. "They're coming!" I looked back. The figure was fading, consumed by shadows, as the darkness itself surged toward me. I had to choose. I was standing at the edge between two unknowns. "Stay with me!" I shouted back, tears stinging my eyes. But the figure was gone. I inhaled sharply, bracing myself for whatever lay beyond the door. I had no choice but to step into the darkness. Stepping into the darkness felt like diving into a void. I willed myself not to hesitate, even as the air turned colder, brimming with an eerie stillness. I crossed the threshold, and the door slammed shut behind me with a finality that sent a shiver down my spine. The space was unnaturally dark, and I could hardly see my hands in front of my face. I stretched them out, fumbling into the cold emptiness, but there was nothing solid to grasp. It was as if the darkness were swallowing me whole. Panic started to rise in my chest, but I forced myself to breathe. I needed clarity. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing in the void. "Is anyone there?" The only response was a soft whisper, words woven together that I couldn't understand. It felt like I was not alone, yet I couldn't see anyone. Then, a flicker of light appeared ahead of me. I squinted, instinctively moving toward it. Each step felt like wading through water. The flicker waxed and waned, drawing me closer. As I advanced, the light solidified into a small lantern hanging from an iron hook embedded in the wall. The moment I touched it, the air hummed with energy, and shadows danced around me like restless spirits. I glanced around and saw symbols carved into the stone walls, eerily similar to those on the small door upstairs. "What is this place?" I whispered, feeling the weight of history pressing against me. Then I heard it again, a tremor in the darkness. The chanting swelled, now louder and clearer. There were voices, calling out in a haunting melody, but mixed in were cries of despair. It unsettled me. I took a step back, glancing over my shoulder, half expecting someone to stumble through the darkness behind me. "Who are you?" I shouted into the dark. "What do you want from me?" The light from the lantern flickered, as if in response. Then, I noticed something ripple in the shadows. A figure began to form in the distance. It was too vague to identify, but the energy shifted around it, warping my perception. I felt trapped between fear and curiosity. "Let me show you," the figure whispered, the voice dripping with urgency. It stretched a hand toward me, fingers beckoning. I hesitated, caught between my instinct to retreat and the desire to understand. Maybe I could learn something here. Maybe the answers were just beyond the fear. With a deep breath, I reached out, taking a step forward. But then the chanting ceased abruptly, and in that silence, a scream erupted from somewhere far deeper in the dark. "No!" I shouted instinctively, feeling my heart leap. I turned back toward the lantern, its light flickering dangerously. "Help!" It was the voice from before, the one that cried for help in the attic. Suddenly, the darkness began to swirl violently. Shadows erupted from the corners of the room, and I realized with a sickening dread that something was coming. I had to decide, trust the figure in front of me or run back into the dark, unending tunnel behind. I moved closer to the lantern, feeling a pull toward the figure. But then, just as I grasped the warmth of the light, the lantern shattered, leaving me engulfed in darkness once more. Panic surged as I struggled to breathe, my heart pounding against the silence. And then, a new voice rang out. "You shouldn't have come here." Before I could react, the figure lunged at me, and everything went black. I gasped, my breath coming in short, terrified bursts as I stumbled backward. The weight of darkness pressed against me thicker than before, and I felt the chill curl around my limbs like fingers. I couldn't tell if I was falling or simply frozen in place. Suddenly, I saw a glow not from the broken lantern, but from deep behind me. It was faint, a shimmering light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Desperation ignited within me. I turned away from the place where the figure had lunged, trying to outpace whatever terror had just tried to claim me. The glow grew brighter, and with it, the shadows began to recede, revealing uneven stone floors strewn with dust and debris. I pressed forward, focused only on the increasing light. I had to find out what it was. A voice whispered in my mind, "Follow it." I picked up my pace, weaving around damp heaps of what looked like old blankets or cloaks, remnants of something long abandoned. The closer I got to the glow, the more I could make out shapes dancing along the walls, more of those same symbols I had seen earlier. They seemed to pulse with the light, illuminating the words of an ancient language I couldn't understand. As I reached the source, I found a small stone altar, and on it lay an orb that was radiating warmth. It shimmered with colors that felt alive, changing like a cascade of falling leaves. My hands trembled as I reached for it. "I don't know what you are, but please help me," I murmured, a plea formed from fear. The moment my fingers brushed its surface, the orb surged with energy. A wave washed over me, a mixture of warmth and cold, and suddenly I was yanked into visions, flashes of memories, faces and places unconnected by time. I saw the figure again, its face clearer now. It was a woman with empty eyes, her expression a mixture of longing and sorrow. "Get out!" she screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the howling wind that echoed through the chamber. I lurched back, wrestling with the sensations that crashed over me. I held onto the altar as if it were my last lifeline. The ground beneath me trembled. I looked back to where I had come from, caught between the light and the darkness. The figure materialized again, closer this time, and I felt a rush of terror. "You can't stay," she said urgently. "You have to go now." Before I could ask why or how, the altar erupted with blinding light, flooding the chamber and pushing the shadows further away. Then, without warning, I was thrown against the stone wall. Pain radiated through my side, and I struggled to stay conscious amid the chaos. "Help!" came that same cry again, echoing from somewhere farther back in the darkness. It was a plea, desperate and raw. My heart raced as the figure vanished into the light. Was she warning me of a greater danger, or was she my only chance of survival? I forced myself to my feet, heart racing. I had to make a choice, but the only thing I knew for certain was that the shadows were hungry, and I was trapped between escaping and seeking the truth. And then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching. I couldn't stay here. I had to decide. I turned sharply, my instincts taking over. The footsteps grew louder, quickening like a countdown. I couldn't stay near the altar anymore. It felt like a temporary reprieve, a fragile shield that wouldn't hold much longer. So I took a deep breath and dashed toward the nearest passage, which twisted further into darkness. The shadows whispered as I fled. I could feel them clawing at my back, urging me to turn around, but I pressed on. The passage narrowed, the stones slick with moisture, and I could taste the damp air biting at my throat. My heart drummed in my ears, drowning out everything but the sound of my own breath. I finally stumbled into a larger chamber. My breath fogged in front of me, mixing with the stale scent of long-abandoned dust. A flicker of movement caught my eye. I froze, rational thoughts crumbling to dust. It was another figure, a man, gaunt and shadowed, standing at the far end of the chamber. "Help!" I called out, desperate for connection, confirming I wasn't as lost as the darkness claimed I was. But instead of a response, he turned sharply and dashed to the side, disappearing into another passage, as if he knew something I didn't. The sudden isolation pressed down on me, heavier than before. Then something glinted on the ground near where he stood. I approached cautiously and bent down to examine it. It was a tarnished locket. I flipped it open, revealing a faded photograph of the same woman from my visions. My heart dropped. Who was she? Why were all these shadows connected to her? Suddenly, a low rumble echoed from the way I had come. The ground vibrated beneath me as if the tunnel itself were alive. I straightened and looked back, dread pooling in my stomach. The shadows began to knit together, pulling tighter, forming into shapes that resembled limbs reaching out to drag me back. I couldn't linger any longer. The locket slid from my trembling hands and clinked against the stone floor. With no time to think, I turned toward the passage the man had vanished into. I rushed forward, driven by a primal fear. But as I barreled through the entrance, I was met with an unexpected turn. It was another chamber, but this one felt alive. Symbols lit up along the walls, their glow inviting yet somehow foreboding. In the center stood an old wooden table covered with more objects, old books, a dagger, and trinkets I couldn't identify. I felt a pull toward the table, an urge to uncover the secrets lying there. But I knew I couldn't stop. The darkness was still close behind, gaining ground. In unexpected defiance, I grabbed one of the books as I ran. Maybe it held answers I needed. Then I heard it again, the voice from before, clearer this time. "You must understand," it cried, reverberating off the walls. I skidded to a stop, mind racing, but I couldn't see where it was coming from. The words felt like a warning, fueling both curiosity and dread. "Understand what?" I shouted into the air. "What is happening?" But there was no answer, only silence. I gripped the book tightly, my pulse racing as I prepared for whatever lay ahead. That was when I saw it, a shadow darting past the edge of my vision. Someone or something was in the dark, lurking just out of reach. I needed to know why I was drawn here, and who that woman was. But as the air thickened with the weight of secrets, I wondered if I'd already become a part of something I was never meant to face. I stepped deeper into the chamber, the glowing symbols casting an eerie light that flickered like a dying ember. The book felt heavy in my hands, and I could hardly catch my breath. I had to keep moving. The shadows were still on my tail, whispering my name, each sound sharper than the last. In the middle of the room, I caught sight of a stone pedestal. It was covered in cobwebs, but there was something resting on it, a small, translucent orb that pulsed softly, as if it had its own heartbeat. My feet moved closer, drawn by an inexplicable force. I hesitated, then reached out to touch it. The moment my fingers brushed against the surface, a wave of energy surged through me. Visions flooded my mind. The woman from the locket appeared, her face clearer than before, eyes filled with both longing and sorrow. I saw flashes of her life, moments of joy, laughter, and shadowy figures lurking in the back, watching her. It felt like a warning. Then I saw the man I had glimpsed earlier. He, too, looked pained, as if he were trapped in a cycle he couldn't escape. A shadow stretched behind him, dark and looming. I gasped and pulled my hand away. The orb felt cold now, muted as the images faded, leaving me breathless. Suddenly, the calm of the chamber shattered. The walls trembled, and the glowing symbols flickered erratically. I stumbled back and nearly fell against the table, struggling to process what I had just experienced. The shadows coalesced into a mass. They crawled across the floor, but I had no way of knowing if they were still after me. My heart raced again as another figure stepped out from the darkness. This one was different. Tall, draped in a long cloak that absorbed the light around it. I couldn't see its face, only the outline illuminated by the glowing symbols. "Why are you here?" it asked, its voice echoing, distant but immediate. I stuttered. "I don't know. I'm just trying to do not lie," it interrupted, the shadows coiling tighter around my legs. "You seek the truth about her." "Her?" I managed to ask. "Who is she?" The figure began to sway, the cloak shifting like smoke in the air. "You know more than you realize. You have been chosen." A rush of panic shot through me. "Chosen for what?" I shouted, the echoes of my voice swallowed by the vastness of the chamber. "Your fate is intertwined with hers," the figure replied, its voice lowering to a whisper. "You must confront the darkness to find your way." In a rush, the shadows lunged forward. I felt a grip close around my arm, tugging me back toward the passage I had come from. A piercing scream tore through the air, and I realized it was my own. Desperation kicked in. I couldn't go back. I couldn't let them take me. I pulled away, heart pounding, and sprinted toward the only other exit I could see, the book clutched to my chest. As I reached the archway, I glanced back and the figure had vanished, replaced by a wall of darkness blocking my retreat. As I stepped into the new passage, the air shifted. I was no longer just fleeing, I was running into the unknown. Questions raced through my mind, fear clawing at my insides. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Then everything went dark. My heart hammered in my chest as I stumbled through the void. A suffocating darkness enveloped me, but I refused to give in to panic. I couldn't let whatever lurked in the shadows close in again. I needed to focus. Desperation and resolve merged as I pushed forward, weaving through the dark, hoping for a way out. Then, a pinpoint of light appeared in the distance. I sprinted toward it, the glimmer growing brighter with each step. As I got closer, I saw that it was a doorway, framed in a soft, warm glow. Relief surged through me, and I dove toward it, stumbling through the threshold. I found myself back in my cottage's attic, breathing heavily amidst a swirl of dust motes illuminated by dappled sunlight filtering through the grimy window. Confusion washed over me. How was I here? Had I really been in that darkness at all? Was it all a dream? I felt the weight of exhaustion settle in the pit of my stomach. As I collected my bearings, I tried to make sense of everything. I scanned the attic, heart racing as I searched for any clues from the alternate reality. The air felt different, tinged with the lingering crispness of the outside world. My gaze caught on the doll lying in the corner, untouched, and I slowly approached it. It looked worn and fragile, its glassy eyes glimmering faintly, but the whispers had faded, leaving an unsettling silence in their wake. The door to the attic creaked open behind me, and I turned, half expecting to see the shadowy figure waiting. Instead, it was just the old man from next door, looking more startled than ever. "That's quite a hefty knocking you got going on," he said, scratching his beard. "I thought the roof was coming down." I stood there, frozen, debating whether to confide in him about everything. My instincts screamed at me to share my tale and maybe, just maybe, find some sort of connection to the other world I had glimpsed. But deep down, another voice warned that some truths were better off unshared. "Are you all right?" he pressed, concern etched across his features. "Yeah," I finally managed to say. "Just a strange night." The old man eyed me skeptically, his gaze flickering toward the doll still lying at my feet. "You might want to get rid of that thing. It's not common to see dolls around here, especially not in an attic." A cold shiver danced down my spine as I heard those words. I hadn't considered throwing it away. But the urge to investigate the doll gripped me tighter than before. "Right," I said slowly. "I'll think about it." I moved past him and headed toward the stairs, but I couldn't shake off the sense of being watched from somewhere. Was it the house? The doll? Or the darkness I had just escaped? The uncertainty clawed at my gut like a visceral reminder that I hadn't really left everything behind. I closed the attic door behind me, sealing those lingering questions within the shadows. Maybe the whispers were gone, but the haunting sensation remained. As I walked through the familiar halls of my cottage, my thoughts bounced around like echoes in the air. I didn't know if I would ever understand what had transpired. I paused by the kitchen window, looking out toward the woods where I once walked. Every rustle of leaves could carry a hint of something unseen. The town felt the same, but everything had subtly changed. I could still hear echoes of the whispers threading through my mind, simultaneously coaxing and taunting me. I had brushed against something unnaturally powerful, something that refused to let go. And then I remembered the shadowy figure that had looked like me, a specter woven into the fabric of my own history. You have been chosen. Those words echoed like a thunderclap in my thoughts. I moved to the window, peering outside. The tree lines swayed gently, inviting yet ominous. What truths remained buried? What complications lingered from my brief foray into the unknown? As the sun dipped lower, I made my decision. I wouldn't ignore the fear, nor the pull toward the darkness that still thrummed beneath my skin. I couldn't abandon what I had barely begun to uncover. With a heavy sigh, I retrieved the doll from the attic. I locked eyes with its cold, glazed stare, and somewhere deep down, I felt the persistent tug of unfinished business. The truth had, indeed, chosen me. And though I didn't know what that meant, I swore to find out. For better or for worse, the shadows in that attic had shown me glimpses of existence beyond the ordinary. Maybe the real journey awaited me just outside those woods. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever might come next. The mystery wasn't over yet.